Every Friday, millions of Muslims recite Surah Al-Kahf. You've probably heard it your whole life. But what if this single surah contains 4 complete stories, each one a precise warning about the 4 greatest trials humanity will ever face? And hidden inside those stories are connections so deliberate, so exact, that when you finally see them, you will never read Al-Kahf the same way again. Let's go deeper. Number 1. The 4 stories are not random. They are a divine map against the 4 trials of Dajjal. Most people who recite Al-Kahf every Friday experience it as 4 separate, loosely connected moral tales. A group of young men, a wealthy farmer, a wise traveler, a powerful king. But classical scholars, including Ibn al-Qayyim and Ibn Kathir, identified something extraordinary hidden in the architecture of this surah. Each story corresponds with precise intentionality to one of the 4 major trials, or fitna, that the Prophet, peace be upon him, warned would define the end of times. The trial of faith, the trial of wealth, the trial of knowledge, and the trial of power. This is not a coincidence scholars read into the text. The Prophet, peace be upon him, himself, prescribed this specific surah as protection against Dajjal, as recorded in Sahih Muslim, and the reason becomes clear only when you understand what Dajjal actually represents. Not merely a single figure, but a force that attacks human beings through these exact 4 doors. In Surah Al-Kahf 18:1-8, Allah opens with praise for a book that contains no crookedness, no deviation, and then immediately presents 4 stories that map every crooked path the human soul can be led down. Imagine receiving a letter with 4 sealed envelopes and being told that each one contains the answer to the 4 most dangerous threats you will ever face in your life. That is precisely what Allah placed in your hands. The surah is not a collection of tales. It is a complete survival manual, structured with the architectural precision that only divine authorship can produce. And the fact that most of us have been reciting it weekly without seeing this structure is itself the first lesson, that the depth of the Quran exceeds the surface of our reading. Once you see the map, every story that follows transforms from a narrative into a diagnosis. Number 2, the people of the cave, the trial of faith, and the hidden meaning of the number. The surface of this story is familiar. A group of young men, refusing to abandon their faith under a tyrannical ruler, retreat into a cave and are miraculously caused to sleep for 309 years, awakening to find the world around them transformed by Allah's power. Surah Al-Kahf 18:9-26 tells this story, and most recitations treat the miracle of extended sleep as the primary lesson. But the deeper meaning is hidden, not in what happened, but in a deliberate gap Allah builds into the narrative. In verse 18:22, a debate breaks out about how many young men were in the cave. 3, 5, 7. And Allah's response is striking. Say, my Lord knows best their number. This withholding is not accidental. Allah is embedding a theological instruction directly inside the story, that certainty belongs only to Him, and that consuming yourself with unknowable details is a form of spiritual distraction. But there is another number in this story that scholars find extraordinary. The young men slept for 300 years, and Allah adds 9, a figure that, as classical commentators note, aligns precisely with the difference between 300 solar years and 300 lunar years. That mathematical precision, woven quietly into a single verse, functions as a signature, the kind only the creator of both calendars could leave. And then there is the detail almost everyone passes over entirely. The dog at the entrance of the cave, mentioned not once but 5 times. Picture that loyal animal, sitting at the threshold, associated forever with those who chose truth over comfort. The trial of faith being mapped here is not abstract. It asks whether, when the entire world around you abandons what is true, you have the courage to withdraw, to hold firm, and to trust that Allah will restore what was lost, just as he restored those young men to a world that had been rewritten while they slept. According to the hadith recorded in Sahih Muslim, whoever memorizes the first 10 verses of this surah will be protected from Dajjal, and this story is precisely why. Because the first trial Dajjal brings is the trial of your identity, your faith, your willingness to stand alone when standing alone costs everything. The first trial tests what you will hold on to when the world tries to pull it away. But the second trial asks a completely different and perhaps more dangerous question. What happens to your soul when the world stops taking things away and starts giving you everything instead? Number 3, the owner of 2 gardens, the trial of wealth and the ayah that predicts its own fulfillment. Picture 2 gardens side by side, rivers running through both, every vine heavy with fruit, every tree standing tall in perfect abundance, and a man looking at all of it and seeing only himself. This is the scene Allah constructs in Surah Al-Kahf, 1832-44, and the wealthy man's error is not that he possessed great wealth. It is that wealth became the lens through which he understood reality. He looked at his gardens and saw his own achievement. He looked at his companion, a man of lesser means, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had confused Allah's provision with personal merit. And then, in verse 1839, Allah places inside the story the exact words the man failed to say. MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah. What Allah wills, there is no power except with Allah. This is one of the most extraordinary moments in the entire Quran. Allah does not simply tell you what to say when you witness something beautiful. He shows you a man who did not say it, and then shows you what happened to his gardens immediately afterward, reduced to ruin. The vines collapsed over their trellises. The water sunk deep into the earth. Every trace of abundance gone. Muslims recite MashaAllah precisely because of this story, but most have forgotten the catastrophe embedded in the verse that made the prescription necessary. The trial of wealth, as this story maps it, is not about how much you possess. It is about attribution. Whether you look at what you have been given and remember the giver, or whether the gift quietly replaces the one who gave it. Scholars note that verses 1845 to 46 follow immediately with the parable of rain. Wealth and worldly life descend like water from the sky, produce beauty for a brief moment, then dry into dust. Only al-baqiyat, al-salihat, the righteous lasting deeds, remain with your Lord and carry any weight in what is coming. Imagine building something magnificent over the course of your entire life, standing before it one morning, and realizing in that moment that you forgot to credit the hands that made your hands possible. That forgetting is the trial. And Allah, in His mercy, wrote the antidote directly into the story before the trial even concludes. Number 4, Musa and Al-Khidr. The trial of knowledge and the 3 lessons most people stop before reaching. This is the longest and most structurally intricate story in Surah Al-Kahf, occupying verses 1860 to 82, and its position as the third of 4 stories is deliberate in a way that rewards careful attention. The trials of faith and wealth test what you cling to externally, your identity, your possessions. The trial of knowledge is interior. It targets the architecture of your certainty, the confidence you have built from everything you have learned, and it does so through a scenario of breathtaking theological precision. Musa, one of the greatest prophets in Islamic tradition, the one whom Allah spoke to directly, the one who received the Torah and parted the sea, arrives before Al-Khidr, a figure whose name does not even appear in the Quran, and is placed in the position of student. According to the hadith recorded in Sahih Bukhari 122, Musa had declared before his people that he was the most knowledgeable of men, and Allah's response was to send him on a journey to someone who knew what he did not. Picture Musa walking along a riverbank, following a man he cannot fully understand, watching him damage a perfectly good boat belonging to poor fishermen, watching him take the life of a young boy, watching him rebuild a wall in a barren town that offered them no hospitality, and at each act, Musa's certainty rises faster than his patience. The three violations, each followed by Al-Khidir's eventual explanation, form a precise structure that mirrors the human experience of questioning divine decree. We always see the damage before we understand the mercy. The boat was damaged to protect it from a king who was seizing vessels by force. The boy was taken because his nature would have led his believing parents into ruin. The wall concealed an inheritance Allah was preserving for two orphaned children until they came of age. Every act that appeared wrong was saturated with a wisdom that required a vantage point Musa did not yet have. And when Al-Khidir finally departs, his closing words carry a weight that scholars return to across centuries. This is the parting between me and you. Knowledge offered to a heart not yet humbled enough to receive, it always ends in separation. Surah Al-Kahf, 1865, describes Al-Khidir as a servant to whom Allah had granted mercy and had taught a certain knowledge from himself. Not scholarly knowledge, not accumulated learning, but direct divine insight, the kind that operates beyond the horizon of human perception. Imagine being tested not by what you lack, but by what you are most proud of possessing. That is the trial of knowledge. And the question Allah is asking every person who has ever doubted His decree is the same question embedded in this story. How many acts would you have witnessed before you walked away? Number 5. Dhul-Qarnayn, the trial of power and the wall that still stands. This story arrives last among the four for a reason. Faith, wealth, and knowledge are trials that most human beings will face in some form across their lives. Power, in the scale Dhul-Qarnayn possessed it, is a trial reserved for those whom Allah elevates to a position where the entire world becomes available to them. And the question Allah asks of such a person is whether they will reach upward or outward. Surah Al-Kahf, 1883-98, introduces Dhul-Qarnayn not through conquest or military inventory, but through movement and response. He travels to the place where the sun sets, then to the place where it rises, and in each direction he encounters people and makes a judgment. Mercy for those who believe and do right, consequence for those who persist in wrongdoing. His compass is Allah, not ambition, and this distinction is everything. Picture an iron wall rising between two mountain ranges, layer upon layer of smelted metal, molten copper poured between the iron blocks until the structure becomes a single unified barrier. The kind of engineering detail that has no place in mythology, but every place in divine narration. Allah describes the construction of the barrier against Gog and Magog, known in Arabic as Ya'juj and Ma'juj, with a specificity that classical scholars read as authentication. This is not a symbolic wall. It is described as a real, constructed barrier that will remain sealed until the appointed hour, when, as Surah Al-Kahf 1898 states, the promise of Allah comes and He makes it level. But the moment in this story that carries the deepest hidden meaning is one that most listeners pass over entirely. When the people living under threat of Gog and Magog offer Dhul-Qarnayn tribute, wealth, resources, payment, in exchange for his protection, he refuses. His response, recorded in verse 1895, is that what his Lord has established him in is better than anything they could offer. Imagine possessing the authority to conquer every nation from east to west, and then being handed additional wealth on top of everything you already control, and saying no, not as performance, not as strategy, but because you genuinely believe that what Allah has given you surpasses every material offer the world can make. That is the surah's final portrait of a human soul that has completely passed the trial of power. Dhul-Qarnayn is placed here at the end of the four stories because he represents the destination. What a person looks like when faith, gratitude, humility before knowledge, and freedom from the love of worldly authority have all been fully internalized. According to the hadith in Sunan Abu Dawud, the Dajjal will arrive with mountains of food, rivers of water, and claims of divine power, offering everything Dhul-Qarnayn was offered, and more. The soul that has absorbed the surah will already know the answer before the question is even asked. Number 6. The recitation on Friday. Why the timing is not tradition, but protection. Almost every Muslim who recites Surah Al-Kahf on Friday does so because they were taught to, because it is sunnah, because there is blessing in it. And all of that is true and sufficient reason. But the deeper logic behind the timing, the reason Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, prescribed this specific surah for this specific day, is something most people have never been told. According to the hadith recorded in Sahih Muslim 2937, whoever reads Surah Al-Kahf on Friday will have light shine for them between that Friday and the next. And according to narrations in Sunan al-Nasa'i, reciting the first 10 or the last 10 verses of this surah offers specific protection from Dajjal. Friday, according to several prophetic narrations, is the day associated with the emergence of Dajjal at the end of times. The recitation is therefore not simply a weekly spiritual reward. It is a weekly immunization, a deliberate rehearsal of the antidote before the poison arrives. Picture your week as a landscape you are about to walk through, and imagine that every Friday morning, Allah places in your hands a detailed map of every deceptive path, every false valley, every misleading light you might encounter before you return to Friday again. That is what the light described in the hadith represents. Not merely a metaphor for blessing, but what classical scholars describe as a nur of perception, a sharpened capacity to distinguish truth from deception in the days ahead. The final verse of the surah, Al-Kahf 18:110, closes with the simplest possible instruction after everything that has come before it. Do righteous work, and do not associate partners with Allah in worship. After 4 stories, 7 items of hidden meaning, and 109 verses of divine architecture, the surah ends with 2 lines. And those 2 lines contain the entire thesis. The surah opens in verse 18:1 by praising Allah for a book with no crookedness, no iwaj, no deviation, and closes by describing the person that straight book is written for, the one whose hope is in meeting their Lord, whose deeds are sincere, and whose worship is uncontaminated. Reciting this surah every Friday is not habit. It is calibration. You are resetting your compass once a week, by the mercy of Allah, before the trials of the week ahead have the chance to pull it off course. Number 7. The opening and closing form a perfect frame, and the hidden word in between. Everything in Surah Al-Kahf has been building toward this final layer, and it is the one that transforms the surah from a collection of profound stories into a single, unified message addressed directly to your soul. The surah opens in verse 18:1 with praise for Allah, who sent down upon his servant a book with no iwaj, no crookedness, no deviation, no bend in any direction. This is the thesis statement of everything that follows. In a world of trials specifically designed to distort your perception of reality, to make falsehood look like truth, and loss look like punishment, and arrogance look like confidence, Allah begins by placing in your hands a straight and uncorrupted source. And then the surah closes in verse 18:110 with the definition of the person that straight book is written for. Whoever hopes for the meeting with their Lord, let them do righteous work and associate no one in the worship of their Lord. Opening and closing read together as a single complete sentence. This undeviated book belongs to the undeviated heart. But the hidden meaning that most people never reach is in the name of the surah itself, Al-Kahf, the cave. Classical Arabic scholars note that the root KHF carries the meaning of a sheltering enclosure, a place that surrounds and protects what is placed within it. The cave in the first story was not merely a setting, it was the mechanism of divine protection, a physical enclosure that Allah used to preserve the faith of those young men from a world that wanted to destroy it. And when you understand that, every story that follows reveals itself as another kind of cave. The gardens of the wealthy man needed the cave of gratitude to protect the blessing within them. Musa needed the cave of humility to protect the knowledge he carried from being corrupted by his own certainty. Dhul-Qarnayn needed the cave of submission to protect his power from becoming tyranny. Picture the word Al-Kahf written in Arabic calligraphy, glowing softly at the center of a circle, and surrounding it the 4 stories like 4 chambers of a single shelter, each one protecting a different dimension of the human soul from a different direction of attack. That image is the surah. Scholars across centuries have described Al-Kahf as one of the most architecturally complete chapters in the Quran, and the reason is that it does not simply tell you what the trials are, it encloses you within the answer. Every Friday, when you recite this surah, you are not performing a ritual. You are entering the cave. You are placing yourself inside the shelter Allah built for believers who are trying to navigate a world determined to bend them out of shape. And the question this final hidden meaning leaves you with is the one that matters most. Which of the 4 trials, faith, wealth, knowledge, or power, is the cave you need to enter most urgently right now? If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.